The introduction. Okay.
All right. Well, good evening, everyone. We are Dave and Julie Cook. We are volunteer teaching couple with the Couple League. We have been teaching with them for 9 years. We've been married for 12, and throughout all 12 years of our marriage, we have used natural family planning, or NFP. We were reluctant actually to become teachers initially. It's kind of a funny story. I had an impression of Couple League as being kind of a hard-nosed organization, and I thought, I want nothing to do with them. I've learned their methods, sure, but I don't want to teach with them. I don't want to be associated with them professionally. But as it goes, as you know, the important things in life are, God will eventually worm his way into your heart if you pray about it enough. And after a while, we realized, wow, we are called to this. And I think we completed the certification in record time. I think they told us we were like the quickest ones through the process.
Studied every night.
Yeah,
We didn't cheat.
were intense.
Guaranteed it.
And we have absolutely loved teaching people. I can't imagine our lives without this. I'm so glad that we didn't stay hardened and reluctant to God's call to be NFP teachers.
We've taught people in North Dakota, we've taught people in Guam. We do a lot of teaching online in addition to here in Grand Rapids in person. So we have many different ways to learn.
Correct. Yet there's also a self-paced option with Couple League that we offer. So do you want to kind of get into our early relationship, our reasons for learning NFP, and then how it kind of played out for us in the first years of our marriage?
Yes, we were asked to answer two questions. The questions were, first, how did you learn about NFP? How did it impact your marriage? And then secondly, how do you think it will impact your marriage in the future, especially with any future kids that you have? And I have to admit, I was a convert. I knew nothing about Catholicism except that you had to go to Mass every Sunday. My parents were Protestant growing up. There really wasn't anything anti-Catholic that was said or done in the home, but I didn't know anything until I met Julie. And Julie was very tenacious back in the day. Very kind of like, I'm Catholic, and I think you should be too.
I think everybody should be.
And I'm going to tell you all about it. And I met her in college, and I remember meeting Julie and thinking, oh man, you make me really tired because you talk all the time. But the more I got to know her, the more I got to learn that Julie was really on fire for Catholicism. And one thing about myself is I don't really ascribe to kind of the emotional sort of Catholicism. Mine's more a mind-based, like learning the rules, learning the dogma, understanding why the church teaches what it does. And Julie was the first person I had met who was able to engage on the intellectual level. If I asked her a question like, why do you pray with Mary? There wasn't a long, can't believe it. There was an actual explanation that made sense. So when we got engaged, I had converted around our engagement. Julie said, why don't we take a natural family planning course? And we were not sexually active while we were engaged or before. We actually had sex the first night on our wedding night. So I didn't really know what to expect from NFP. Just thought it was something Julie wanted to do. And that, unfortunately, we had to work very hard in the Diocese of Marquette, Michigan. We went to Northern. Go Wildcats. We had to work very hard to find somebody up there who knew what we were talking about and to teach us, which seemed very odd. Like, if this is something the church wants you to do, then why is the information hidden behind multiple people you have to talk to? So I think for me, and I'll let Julie share in a second, it was that kind of hidden information. Like, what do you have over there? Do you have something hidden under that blanket? If you're hiding that, it must be really good. Mm-hmm. So I was very intrigued to learn what it actually was because I had no preconceived notions. So my initial curiosity was more intellectual based. It was, I'll learn this, but if there's something I don't like, then I always have the option to talk to Julie, and she can maybe explain to me why she wants to do this. Or we can figure out something else that will work in our marriage.
Right. So those were Dave's reasons. Mine were somewhat different, coming from a cradle Catholic background. Growing up, my parents were always very consistent, telling me repeatedly, basically they brainwashed me, which I'm grateful for, but they made sure to always drive home that the Catholic Church is the one true church, and as such, all of her teachings, all of her doctrine are flawless. And even if it's difficult to accept that doctrine, it is for our best interest. The church has our best interest in mind. And it kind of makes me laugh when, people say, oh, yeah, fertility awareness and not using birth control, it's so repressive for women. It's not good health for women. And I'm thinking, really, do you honestly think the Catholic Church wants to make us miserable? I don't think so. If that were the case, I really doubt Christ would have come to earth and sacrificed himself on the cross. That doesn't seem like the sort of situation where all the burden is on us, just being miserable all of our lives. So that was my position of trust coming into it. It was a good faith position. And I also kind of wanted that marriage insurance that you two ladies talked about earlier, about its 3 to 5% divorce rate among NFP users compared to 30 to 50% for the general population. It's a no-brainer. I mean, for me, it just made sense. What I had learned growing up and what I saw in the statistics and in the healthy marriages, including my own parents, it all lined up. And I wanted that for myself. I wanted that for us. And around the time that we got engaged, my brother gave us a set of CDs from Christopher West called Naked Without Shame. And I opened this and I just stared at him like, what did you just give us? Is this some kind of inappropriate media? What in the world? I had never heard of Christopher West or theology of the body at any point in my Catholic school teaching or in my Catholic home. So I was intrigued, to say the least. Like, Naked Without Shame. Gosh, this is going to be fun. So we brought it back with us to college, and we just listened to all those CDs, and my mouth was on the floor. I'm like, where has this teaching been my whole life? It is astonishingly beautiful. And so, whereas I had just had kind of a legalistic appreciation for Catholic teaching up until that point, it totally matured and transformed into something far, far greater than I could have ever imagined as a result of learning the theology of the body. It gave the why behind the teaching, instead of just do this because the Catholic Church says so. Like, here are the multitude of reasons why this is what the Church teaches and how it directly benefits your relationship. And from that point, I mean, there was no turning back. If I had wanted it before, there was absolutely no way I could ever have changed my mind at that point. So that was what set the foundation for basically a lifetime of appreciating the Church teaching.
So what effect has NFP had on our marriage? Growing up in a non-Catholic household, my parents were very sensitive about the topic of sex. Basically, it was, I don't want to talk about this, but here's a book called Where Did I Come From? And if you don't know what I'm talking about, we are close enough to the library right now. You could go check it out. And when you look at the photos, you're going to get the impression that only frumpy people have sex. And it's going to seem like, ooh, I don't want to have intercourse, because the photos and the way it's talking about it make it seem like it's not that much fun. So I kind of filled in the pieces with the internet. I've got to be honest. I had nothing else. I had some friends who would talk about it, but without a really solid grounding or an adult who can fill in the pieces for you, most kids, if they have the opportunity and access to the internet and computer, will go on and type key phrases, and you can probably figure out what was going on there. So when NFP came up, it was kind of like, I need to rewire my brain and the way that I am thinking about this. Sex isn't all about me and my pleasure. It's about the two of us becoming one, and the fact that we can or cannot have a baby is really our choice. I had an initial impression of NFP when we were first learning, because our teaching couple had about 6 kids. I thought, well, we are going to fill a pew worth of kids in about 2 years after our marriage. But what I didn't realize is a lot of people who learn NFP and are really passionate about it are also very open to life and their circumstances. So they want to have big families. That hasn't been our circumstance so far. We can get into a little more of that. I think we've got about 5 minutes to go, but I'll turn it over to Julie and let her answer that question.
So obviously Dave's experience, I don't think is altogether uncommon these days, unfortunately. Children, I don't remember what percentage of children by like age 12 or 13 have seen porn. I mean, it starts early. You don't want your kids learning from the internet. That you don't want them having that be their first exposure to this. So we're looking at it as parents. If we're taking ownership of the sex talk, which we definitely want to do, we do not want public school teaching them, we don't want the internet teaching them, we don't want social media teaching them, we're going to go for an integrated, holistic approach. And we want to avoid the extreme ends of the spectrum, where on the one hand, kind of like Dave's situation growing up, it was kind of a repressed, prudish environment where we're not really comfortable talking about it. And then at the other end of the spectrum, you've got, really permissive, hey, hedonistic lifestyle, do whatever makes you happy. We don't want either one of those ends of the spectrum. We want something nice in the middle, nice and moderate. So where we find that, the best place for that is with the theology of the body and teaching about NFP. Teaching our children that sex is not dirty, but it's also sacred. And so kind of right in between those two ends of the spectrum is where you're going to find that happy medium. And in order to live what we teach, we need to be using NFP, obviously. Something else I wanted to mention, Laura and Georgia mentioned it earlier briefly, how certain forms of birth control are not really in line with pro-life teaching. So obviously, as Catholics, we want to be pro-life from conception to natural death. And when it comes to birth control, a lot of people are not aware that there's the abortifacient side of hormonal options out there. So that means that if a life is conceived and it tries to implant, the birth control prevents it from implanting. It's considered an early abortion. This is completely incompatible, obviously, with a pro-life message. So we want to be consistent with our pro-life message that we are teaching our children. And then I'm going to let you talk about this last part here.
One of the things we wanted to talk about was society's overemphasis on sex. And a couple nights ago I said, Julie, how often in the span of our married life, like what percentage are we actually having sex? Not how often are we thinking about it, but how often are we actually doing it? And so we calculated and figured out that we spend 0.3% of our entire time actually engaging in intercourse, which seems kind of odd. Like people place an overemphasis on something literally you're only doing for maybe a half an hour, if it's a good night, let's just be honest. But I think that what Laura and Georgia said about the communication and kind of building from there, the rest of the stuff that happens in your life, like getting a tooth extracted, okay, well I need to take a day off of work, I have to watch our son Denver, things like that are going to be a lot more important than how frequently and how good your sex life is. That being said, we have studies, and we can give you links and references, that compared the quality and frequency of intercourse between couples that were practicing natural family planning to couples that were actively contracepting. And they found that there was no significant difference between the two groups as to how frequent the intercourse happened.
Per month. So
Per
over
month.
the span of an entire month, it averaged out to be pretty much the same.
So with NFP, you get the marriage insurance, you get open communication, you have kind of a guideline and a foundation to figure out, what am I doing in the bedroom? Am I doing something that, would make Julie feel bad? I'm not going to get into graphic stuff, but we read things on Facebook. There's a Facebook group called NFP Catholic Style, and one of our audience